asked, "Can I get raw milk from you?" And he's like, "Well, it's kind of illegal. You'd have to own a cow." And I said, "What if me and some friends all went in together and we bought a cow together? Could we pay you to milk the cow and put the milk in jugs and we could pick it up?" And we came up with an idea for a cow share. This was back in the year 2001. And so this cow share was growing. I don't know, when the government showed up, how many cow share owners did we have?
20.
Okay, so we had about 20 friends all sharing cows and going to his farm and getting jugs of milk out of the fridge. And we had to first pay for our share of the cow, and then we had to pay him to milk the cow. Well, the government showed up with a cease and desist and thousands of dollars of fines and a threat to throw you in jail, right? And I was like, the government can do that? The government can.
See, the world out there is rewriting definitions, so we're going to rewrite our definitions too, okay? So, produce in the state of Indiana now refers to any agricultural or naturally occurring product that is grown, cultivated, raised, or harvested for human consumption and is not prohibited by state or federal law, okay? That's a big mouthful that says everything you want to sell. Everything you want to produce. Okay, remember how you couldn't sell things that were fermented, all of that, you know, technically there's a lot of stuff about sourdough, some of it that you can't produce and sell. Well, you can now. This covers everything, fruits, vegetables, and an intentionally broad any agricultural product. Indiana producers are able from their own homes to grow, cook, create, and sell prepared foods, baked goods, fermented foods, preserves, jams, jellies, natural sweeteners like honey, syrup, etc., and even candy if you want to make candy. Again, the breadth of all of these terms is very intentional. As for point of sale, you may now sell not only from your own home, this is a big deal, especially for farmers out there. You may sell from an outbuilding on your property without converting that outbuilding to a Class 1 structure. Okay, that's a big deal. So we sold out of my barn illegally for a decade until they put their foot on my throat, and I said I'll never shut down. They wanted me to come in and insulate it, run fire protection, you know, fire, all of this kind of stuff. They wanted me to do about $70,000 worth of work to my barn, and I said no thanks, I'll file a bill. I'm going to get in such bad trouble for this. I don't care. Okay, so you can still ship your goods within state. Let's see here. I'm going to fast forward through this because a lot of this isn't that interesting. But so essentially, here's what it comes down to. All accountability is left to the discretion of the producers themselves and their customers, because consumers should be regulating producers with their business, period. Okay, and I think Joel will appreciate this one. Prior, we had a $10,000 limit. Okay, if you want to know what was keeping us in our place, we had a $10,000 limit for sales in order to be a home-based vendor. The highest number for that in America is Florida, which is 25,000. So our nation is not really interested in supporting people and small businesses who want to rise up and make real money and a real living and produce real food in real quantities that changes the climate, okay, changes the health climate, the agricultural climate. Well, Indiana is a little different now, because now you can raise up to $1.5 million in gross annual revenue. And as a guy who raises birds, eggs, meat, everything at scale. I can just tell you, if you get anywhere near that number, call me and tell me what you're doing, okay? That would be great. And if we do encroach on that number, call my office and we'll just push it up again.
Stand for Health Freedom was birthed out of a bad public health policy right here in my home state. We were set to take our next foster placement in 2018 when I got an email that said, we need to see the vaccine records of your biological boys. And I said, okay, great, I'll just go ahead and send over the religious exemption again. And that I was told at that moment that the religious exemption would no longer be satisfactory, that we had to be in compliance with the CDC recommendations for my bio boys. And knowing what I know from being in law and natural health, I said, this doesn't make sense. Like, what's changed since our last foster placement? There's no new science, no new law, no new regulation. What's going on? And they said, we're now reading the Indiana regulation that says threat to the welfare of the foster child to include vaccine status. And I knew, with what I know, that that was nonsense and that my healthy boys were not a threat to the foster children and that this was a barrier to helping the most vulnerable children in our community. So my husband and I looked at each other and we said, where do we go from here? This is too big to fight, but too big not to fight. So we decided to give the people, to give you and your families and your community members a voice on health freedom. So when it comes to issues such as informed consent, parental rights, religious freedom, free speech, and privacy, we are standing on guard to make sure that we protect and expand those 5 pillars of health freedom on your behalf. And since our inception, we have not only fixed that bad policy in Indiana, but we have secured 170 other public health policy wins and helped elect over 1,400 health freedom candidates. And that's because of a movement that started right here in Indiana. So I want to thank you guys for being a part of that, for showing up for family, and for showing that we still value our God-given rights.
Right now, our nation is hungry. It's hungry for truth. It's hungry for trust. It's hungry for the sense that I can live my life without the government getting between my lips and my throat. Between the parents and the children. Between my microbiome and whatever. We are bringing to our culture 5 loaves and 2 fishes. The culture is looking for us to feed it truth, hope, possibility, options, and a return to being filled with our own dreams and ambitions, and not having to sit here and ask a bureaucrat if it's okay to pursue my dream and my ambition. Most of the decisions that you and I make have a governmental ramification. It's either illegal, we have to ask permission, we have to get a license, there's some sort of a compliance thing about almost all the decisions we make. We want to start a business, we want to build a house, we want to sell a chicken, we want to make a homeopathic remedy, whatever. So many of our decisions, and this is the problem. This is the problem when the government intervenes with everything in our lives. Our 50-state experiment has been usurped, essentially. Our 50-state experiment has been usurped. We have arrogated to the federal level the things that used to be done in the states. Imagine if one state said, I don't think education is the government's business. We're just not going to be in the government's business. We're not going to be in the education business. Another state over here says, no, I think every child needs to be educated and we need to provide the education for all these children. You could actually have experiments going on, and you could see which one had more juvenile delinquents and which one had better family stability and which one had fewer jails and all the things. But when you arrogate to the federal level all the things that constitutionally were supposed to be done at the state level, you eliminate the capacity for the 50-state experiments, and you deny the culture the chance to see the creativity of their neighbors. For such a time as this. Folks, for such a time as this. And that morning out in the field, as that story and that phrase just impressed on me, for such a time as this, that was the day that I knew that the rest of my life I would fight for the freedom of two consenting adults exercising freedom of choice to give their microbiome agency to be able to engage in a food transaction without asking a bureaucrat's permission. Safety is not objective. You ever think about that? Safety is not objective. I mean, how else can you explain? It's perfectly fine to feed your kid 3 Coca-Colas a day, but 1 teaspoon of raw milk is hazardous. The truth is that the government's record of picking what's safe and unsafe is pretty dismal. The government told us to get rid of lard and butter, and you want margarine and Crisco, hydrogenated vegetable oil. And we've raised a nation now with hardening of the arteries and all sorts of arteriosclerosis and problems because of margarine. Remember, put blue bonnet on it. It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. How much Crisco and margarine is acceptable to eat today? How much?
0.
0. I mean, would you say that's kind of wrong? I mean, the government, how far did they miss it? 10%? No, they missed it 180%. Completely opposite. And then the government told us you need to douse your everything with DDT. And then we got eagle eggs that wouldn't hatch, and 3-legged salamanders, and infertile frogs, and how wrong was that? About 180 degrees. And then they said, well, we need to feed the place, we need factory farms. We need to dump these antibiotics into the animals. Guess what? We got superbugs, MRSA, C. diff. And we've got a lexicon that didn't exist when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you never heard the term food allergy. If you wanted to have a birthday party for your 3-year-old, moms didn't have to spend a week back and forth asking for what could be served. You just had a party and you ate whatever was there. We didn't hear the term E. coli, Campylobacter, Listeria, Salmonella. These are all a lexicon telling our culture and the U.S. I call it the U.S. enough disrespect.
And my mom took me to the grocery store. She flipped over a package and she said, if you can't read the ingredients in plain English, it's not real food. And then, you know what else I learned about real food? Real food rots. Real food doesn't have preservatives in it. It doesn't have a shelf life of 10 years. You know, I look out, this is incredible. All these young families gathering to celebrate real food, freedom to farm, freedom to homeschool, freedom to raise your kids, freedom to choose whether you want to have your babies at home or with a midwife or a doctor. We lived in Ukraine, where the freedom that we enjoy is nothing like the rest of the world. America is precious. What we have, the freedom is precious. But freedom isn't free. Freedom is not free. We have to fight for it.